It is February 7th, 2020, and this is episode 16 of Film Cult Podcast. I am your host, Chris, and this week, as in every week, we are reviewing 3 different movies. I usually don't go with a theme for these movies. I just kind of pick randomly throughout the years, movies I haven't seen, movies that pique my interest. I just wanted to mention quickly that last week it took me all the way up to me editing and almost about to publish the video version of this podcast on YouTube for me to realize that it kind of coincidentally had a theme, episode 15's show, that all the names of the films were names of people. So it was Richard Jewell, Sweeney Todd, and Steve Jobs. So those are all just 3 first and last names. So I just thought that was interesting that I didn't pick up on that. I didn't mention that in the episode because it really just coincidentally happened, and I didn't even realize until I was right about to publish the video last week on Friday. With that said, this week's episode 16, does have a theme, and the theme of this week's episode is war movies. I have a film about World War I, a film about World War II, and a film about the Vietnam War. And so those are the 3 movies we're going to be talking about today, and I will quickly list them here before going into them each individually. And something that's also unique to this episode is that if you are watching the video version on YouTube, I usually display a poster and the name of the film while I'm reviewing it. And all 3 of these posters for the first time are all fan-made posters by me. I try to, a lot of the times, watch a movie and encapsulate either the story or the essence of it in like a fan-made film poster. So I try to do that with all 3 films. Sometimes I've done it with 1. In previous episodes, I did 1 movie out of 3, or maybe 2, but this is the first episode that I can recall that has all 3 of them were made by me. So I'm probably going to go over why I made them look the way they do at some point. So if you are listening to the audio podcast, I will do my best to describe how it looks from my eyes, but if you could, either go to my artwork page on Instagram, which is Chris Mitchell Artwork. I will put it on the screen right now. Or if you want to go head on to YouTube, if you are listening on Spotify. So yeah, that's my only pre-show messages to announce. So the movies today, the war movies that we will be talking about, are the new 2019 film 1917, directed by Sam Mendes, and then we are going to talk about the 1998 film Saving Private Ryan, of course directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Tom Hanks among others. We will get into that, and we are going to finish off with the Oliver Stone 1986 American war film Platoon. So that is my Vietnam War entry into this war film categorized episode of today. So yeah, those are the 3 films we're going to be talking about in that order because of the order of the world wars and, just the timeline: World War I, World War II, Vietnam. So that's the order I watched them in. Believe it or not, I have seen a part of Saving Private Ryan, but I have not seen this movie altogether. I've never seen Platoon, and of course I've never seen 1917 because it just came out. But yes, without further ado, I guess I will go right into our first review of the day, and that is the American war film during World War I called 1917, which is directed by Sam Mendes, who is known for films such as Skyfall, one of the recent James Bond entries, which is something that I also wanted to talk about. Maybe not in this video even particular, but the James Bond films, with the last Daniel Craig version coming out soon, I think in April of this year, if I can remember correctly from the trailer. But yes, 1917 stars if I can find the list here. I feel like I get to an IMDb page and I know exactly where everything is. I bring everything up, and then as I'm recording, I just forget how to work a laptop. Anyway, and the cast of this film includes Dean Charles Chapman as Lance Corporal Blake and George McKay as Lance Corporal Schofield. These are our two main stars in this movie. We particularly follow them almost as a third soldier kind of point of view, over the shoulder of these two men throughout the entire film, because the big attention grabber of this movie, what everybody was talking about when this came out a few weeks ago, was that the whole film is shown like it is shot in one take, one solid entire take for the whole entire almost 2 hour film, or over 2 hour film, I believe. And like I said, that is the big attention getting thing for this, what I've been hearing about, like whether it's a gimmick or not, or um, if they are able to pull this off. Another movie that I can think of just real quick that does the same one take for a whole entire film vibe, it was Birdman. I have not seen that in full, or maybe I have and I don't remember the plot entirely. I do remember bits and pieces, but yes, that is another film that I can just quickly think of that came out in 2014 that has that one take throughout the whole entire movie feeling. So, of course, it is not one take for the whole entire film. They have cleverly hidden cuts at certain moments, or maybe even not so cleverly hidden. I think you can tell for some of them where they are, but for the most part, I think to the audience, general audience, it would be seamless, and I really, really, really appreciate that part of it. The cinematography is beautiful in this film. And I was going to talk about Sam Mendes briefly. Yes, Skyfall, great, um, beautiful movie on its own as well. He directed Road to Perdition, which came out in 2002, which has Tom Hanks in it. Skyfall also has Daniel Craig in it. Daniel Craig's also in this movie, Road to Perdition. I believe Jude Law is also in that film. Oh, he's the producer of that film. He's not the director. But anyway, I really, really enjoyed that film. It's a really good gangster, crime noir kind of flick that gets underappreciated, I think. I want to talk about some underrated movies, and that's definitely on the list. But yes, we keep getting away from 1917, and I apologize. There's just a lot to unpack within this movie. We follow these two World War I soldiers through this one camera, one single take view, and that allows us to get kind of like a real time feeling on the battlefield. It transfers from day to night, and then from night to dusk to morning again, and we kind of view that in this hour and 59-minute film in real time. So we watch the sun go down and come back up through the visuals and scenery. There's just a really beautiful part in the third act of this film where it is completely dark, but it is very early morning, and as this chase battle kind of mixed conflict is going around this one character, George McKay's character, it slowly but turns into a dark and then a light blue hue of the sky as the sun's. It's just really, really incredible. And yeah, the cinematography is well thought out, and it really does give you a personal feel, especially in World War One, which is I feel like, as far as history is concerned and talking about it in schools and stuff, I feel like World War Two always gets the real spotlight, and I don't feel like a lot of people talk about World War One. From my public school view of it, I can think of them telling us about trench warfare in no man's land and all this stuff that is obviously in the movie. It's very faithful depiction of World War One, and I will get to that, but I just feel like it's not talked about as much. So to see the type of atmosphere that is shown in this movie so well, and things feel so lived in and so real. It's cool to kind of shine spotlight on World War One. Yeah, I feel like the majority of war films are about the Second World War, um, for whatever reason that may be. But yeah, I believe Dean Charles Chapman, yeah, and George McKay did a fantastic job as these young soldiers. We kind of get glimpses of some more well-known actors as commanders and commanding officers, and I think that was pretty cool idea as well, because you get Colin Firth in here as a General Aaron Moore. I do not know who Daniel Mays is, but he's another high commanding officer, sergeant. I really enjoyed his brief performance in this film as well. Excuse me. Basically, Dean Charles Chapman and George McKay get sent to a bunker, and they are briefed on a mission to go save Corporal Blake's brother, who is in a part of another deployment of soldiers. He has to go warn them of a ambush, basically, and if he does not reach his brother and his team in time, sorry, I'm already forgetting the military terms, but if he does not reach them in time, it could basically end in the loss of, I believe, like 2 battalions or like 1,600 soldiers. So a complete massacre. And so it's definitely time, as the poster says, that I kept up my poster as well. Time is the enemy, and they are against the clock here. They have to race across a section of no man's land between these trenches to reach their battalion, and it basically is just following these two soldiers. And I like how they portray the story, and I like how it doesn't become like one man against a whole army situation. We pick and drop off characters along the way, basically as a life of a soldier, you guess, would probably work. You run into people, you run into allies, you run into enemies, and you deal with them accordingly. And yeah, you kind of meet people along the way. They bring them a certain distance, and then they drop them off, and it feels very real, very visceral, and I love this movie. I really came out of it like with a new appreciation for that one take cinematic. I feel like that was used effectively, and we push in front of the characters, we push behind the characters, we kind of get like a 360 view of them throughout the film, and I really enjoyed it. And what else can I say? The last film that I could think of that I watched with um, the war film category that we're talking about is the 2017 Christopher Nolan film Dunkirk. Again, taking a very different direction, and once again, this is 1940, so that is World War II again, but it felt similar to this in some sort of ways, but I feel like 1917 pulled it off a lot better. Dunkirk went for the approach of having nameless characters and without their backstory, kind of giving like a faceless soldier almost, more focusing on the action and the set pieces in that film. Not a bad movie by any means, but definitely not one that I wanted to explore again. But yeah, I remember seeing that in 2017 in the theaters when it came out. And then other than that, I can't think of any other recent war movies that I've seen. So it was cool to kind of explore this genre. But yeah, to wrap up on 1917, Sam Mendes film was really, really good. Like I was saying about the commanding officers, Colin Firth is one. We see Benedict Cumberbatch at the end as another, either sergeant or major, or lieutenant rather. One of those, colonel. He's a Colonel Mackenzie. Okay. But yeah, he appears at the end very briefly. But to see these more veteran actors in this movie as well was cool. Yeah, so I definitely recommend 1917. If you can go see that in theaters. It is still in theaters, I believe. I saw it maybe about, I think maybe on Saturday, so almost a week ago, I pre-record these episodes. So anyway, we are moving on to our second film. So we are moving on to World War II now for the classic drama war film that follows right after the Normandy D-Day invasion, and that is Saving Private Ryan, which was directed by Steven Spielberg, of course starring the talents of Tom Hanks, Tom Sizemore, Edward Burns, Barry Pepper, Adam Goldberg, Vin Diesel, Giovanni Ribisi, and of course Matt Damon. And Paul Giamatti has a very small part in this film too. I just recognized him while I was watching this. I have never seen this movie in full, and it's something that even surprises me because it's just such a classic. But I do remember watching with my dad the opening scene of this film. I remember him just showing me that brief 10-15 minute sequence of D-Day in the beginning, and then we decided to watch something else. But I don't know why. This movie has an incredible pace and incredible story to it, and I kind of see where 1917 maybe took some influence from this story as well, because this is about the army, of course, launching the D-Day invasion. That's basically where we start before, we start at the memorial for those soldiers lost on that day, and this movie's kind of portrayed as like a flashback. But yeah, Tom Hanks plays Captain Miller, and he is given a mission right after the invasion of D-Day to find a Private Ryan, played by Matt Damon, which we do not get to see until the third act, basically. But he is one of 5 brothers, all who lost their lives on that day, basically, in different sections of the war. And the government decides that 4 out of 5 of these soldiers being sent to their poor mother, getting this news, they need to send the last Private Ryan home. So the mission is basically to find Matt Damon and to bring him home. So Tom Hanks and his company of soldiers are on a mission to find a singular Private Ryan, which is something that kind of comes up in 1917 too. Is just there's thousands of soldiers. It kind of becomes like, I'm gonna take a quote from Saving Private Ryan, but it's finding like a needle in a needle stack. They don't really have records of people like that, so it kind of is like word of mouth to like find. At least in 1917, it's his brother who they were looking for specifically, so he knows what his brother looks like. But if you watch the events of that movie, you find out that things do change. But in this, they found another Private Ryan, and they deliver him the news, and then they figure out that it is not the one with the 4 brothers that they are looking for, and they just kind of like send him on his way. So I thought that was pretty funny. That was a scene I've definitely never seen, but a lot of this felt familiar to me, even though I've never seen the movie. Probably just from playing Call of Duty and Medal of Honor Frontline. It has a D-Day invasion in the beginning of its game that is literally based off the first scene in this movie, and I remember that clearly, playing that as a kid. So I don't know, this whole movie as a whole just felt like very familiar to me, even though I hadn't seen it before. The performances in this film are fantastic. Tom Hanks is always incredible. Barry Pepper, Adam Goldberg, Edward Burns, these are all actors who play characters, and they do it very well. I don't know where I was going with that. I feel like I've seen these actors in many other films in the late 90s sprinkled around, and I always enjoy their performances. I feel like, yeah, this is a very good ensemble cast of people, and yeah, I recommend this movie as well. I do regard it as a classic. not only because of the D-Day scene, but the whole movie is very well written. The narrative kind of focuses you with this mission. Same thing with 1917. They are both focused into the mission of finding, in this case, Private Ryan. In this case, their brother. In 1917's case, the brother and his battalion. Before the ambush, they need to find Matt Damon before he, of course, dies in the battlefield, so they can send him home to his poor mother. So I like that they are channeled into like a linear storyline, because as I get to my third final movie, almost there, um, I feel like it's kind of like a little more broad of a narrative, and it doesn't get to um, direct it in some sort of direction, and I feel like that kind of lost interest from me, but not in this film. I like the clear mission of finding Private Ryan, saving Private Ryan, the title of the movie, and yes, I like the performances all around. And both of these movies, sorry, I'm going to compare and contrast all three. Usually, that's not something I do, but all three of these movies do a fantastic job of showing the brutality of war and the overall traumatic situation, and how basically this is a bunch of kids who barely have left their small rural hometowns, and now they are halfway across the globe fighting a war against, you know, enemies that they are not really their own. They're fighting for their country, obviously. So it definitely, all three of them do portray that realistically and in a very serious manner. And there's lighthearted moments in all three of these films, but at their core, it is serious to the brutality and, overall intenseness of World War. So, yeah, that concludes my review of Saving Private Ryan. Highly recommended. 8.6 out of 10. It's a critically acclaimed film, and it definitely deserves the praise. So, we are concluding today with our third and final film, going into the Vietnam era of the, I'm guessing, late 60s probably is when this film takes place. And this is the Oliver Stone film that stars Charlie Sheen, Tom Berenger, and William Dafoe, and that is the 1986 film Platoon. So, Platoon follows a young soldier, I believe his name is Chris as well, played by Charlie Sheen. This film stars Keith David, Forrest Whitaker, Kevin Dillon. Johnny Depp is also in this film, William Dafoe, Tom Berenger, sorry, and Charlie Sheen, who's not listed in this full cast version. I don't really understand a lot of what IMDb does. Okay, there he is as Chris. Yeah. This film, I'm not sure whether it was me watching a third, fourth film now in a row in a sequence, basically, or like I said, the narrative is less driven in this film on a certain mission. It's more just about experiencing Vietnam in a whole, and how their platoon basically walked through Vietnam and all the crisis and confrontation that they met, and all the horrors of war, and especially Vietnam. Just all of the world wars were dirty and corrupt and had war crimes going on, but I feel like Vietnam in specific just had a really, really disgusting feel to it. Especially the U.S. kind of did some dirty things. So, and I think that's explored in this film well enough. And there's tons and tons of movies for all of these world wars that I could have picked. Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now, The Deer Hunter. Those are all about the U.S.-Vietnam War, and I've never seen those either, but just this one specifically was one that I wanted to watch. I do enjoy the acting talents of William Dafoe. Seeing a very young Johnny Depp in this film is cool. Forrest Whitaker, Kevin Dillon, Charlie Sheen, these are all well enough known names, at least to me. Yeah, like I said, the narrative overall, I feel, is more general. We don't really have a specific mission type story like we've had for these other two films. But I still enjoyed this film. I wouldn't exactly recommend it. Like I said, maybe more to me of a film that is trying to explore heavier tones and heavier topics, but maybe falls a little less flat than Saving Private Ryan. Just to me, maybe like I said, watching 4 films in a row wasn't the particular move that you should do, because maybe I was getting more like desensitized to the whole thing and kind of over it. But I still enjoyed this film for what it was. Maybe I will explore some of these other Vietnam era films. But yes, that is my 3 reviews for today. I wanted to briefly mention the posters, and I did. Saving Private Ryan poster, I was trying to focus more on that iconic D-Day scene, them storming the beaches of Normandy, and the Platoon one kind of focusing more on the atmosphere of the Vietnam jungle and the helicopters, and just kind of had this idea of it all inside of the Vietnam era helmets. So that was kind of my idea premise on that one. But yeah, if you could check those out on my art Instagram page, Chris Mitchell Artwork, or head on to the video version of this podcast on YouTube if you aren't there already. I much appreciate that. If you have listened to the show before, thank you so much. Or if you're just here for the first time, thank you very much as well. This has been Film Cult Podcast. As always, reach out, send me film suggestions, critiques on the show, whatever it may be, at filmcultpodcast@gmail.com. I hope you guys have an awesome weekend, and I will see you next week for next week's episode. Goodbye.